can do. You can do individually, you can do in your role in your organization, or that you can do to help build a community action around some event or idea. So with that, I don't have any particular order. Why don't we just start? You guys can come up to this podium. I think that my mic's live, and just give us the high points.
Okay, hello you all. My name is Alexa Grado, and along with Raina and Brittany, we're the student leaders for the Puerto Rico session. And before I read our solutions off, I would just like to give like a few little just statistics and information about Puerto Rico for those who might not know. Our two speakers are Ruth Santiago and Ken Rumelt. One of the interesting things that I thought Ruth said in our session today was Puerto Rico is foreign in a domestic sense. And I think that's kind of like the theme for our session. The median income in Puerto Rico is around 19,000. People there earn 1/3 less than the mainland USA, with most federal laws applying. There's also been proposals in Puerto Rico to construct a waste incinerator, which results in toxic pollutants, impacts public health, and this is an environment with minimum energy generation, with the island of Puerto Rico being 46% in poverty. And so some of the solutions we came up with are here below. The first one we came up with, and this was through conversation in our question and answer because time was limited, is kill the money, kill the project, banning landfills, sustainable development and renewable energy. So I know Ruth Santiago was saying how they spend $2 billion in oil. If we could move that into renewable energy, spend the money elsewhere, strengthen the rule of law, community participation, education of the issue solutions, working with local government, coming to consensus. And then a good one we came up with is the VLS exchange program with Puerto Rico, which Professor Cole mentioned. We have an SIP program that she started here, and sending more students over there to Puerto Rico, working in those areas with lawyers, attorneys, community organizations. And then the seventh one we had was shine light on the issue in Puerto Rico. So thank you.
We were much less organized than that group, so kudos to them. I came from the Women and Families session with Keisha Ram, who's a Vermont state rep or was, and a current community organizer with considerable experience in the state, and my good friend Catherine Rogers, who's a staff scientist at the Silent Spring Institute in Newton, Mass. And we talked about the ways that communities of color and low-income communities are ignored when there's a negative effect due to their environment. So in Vermont, it was an example with Hurricane Irene, how people came out to pick organic carrots because the Intervale was flooded, but down the road, when there was a low-income community that had their homes flooded, they just got dumped a bunch of sand and given some bags, and no one showed up to help. So we talked about prioritizing the ways that we care for people in our communities in that regard. And in terms of our physical and medical health, the Silent Spring Institute focuses on breast cancer research, and so that discussion focuses on using data to prove a causal relationship between environmental toxins and chemicals and bad health outcomes or delayed healthcare access. That is because women of color have a later diagnosis and often have less treatment, or they're offered treatment that offers them fewer options, like having a full hysterectomy instead of a different type of less invasive medical service. So we talked about giving people the full access to their rights and medical services that are available to them, not allowing discrimination in the medical field to negatively impact women and families, but all peoples of color who don't have necessarily the information when they go to the doctor to contest or otherwise negotiate with their healthcare providers. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Danielle Fulmer, and Gina and I worked on the climate change breakout session. So we looked at climate change from an international, national, regional, and state level. And at the end of our session, we did an activity with our group because we wanted to develop something tangible that we could all contribute to. And our theme was a common thread, so that's how we created this. And basically, we just had every group think of solutions on a local level. So we considered multiple different levels during our session, and then the idea was that we wanted to be able to apply ourselves right now, right here. So we're just gonna go ahead and read some of the solutions that we came up with. I'll read some from this side, and then I'll pass it over to Gina. So one of them was climate relief programs for disadvantaged communities. Another one, address the intersection of poverty and climate. And we also had political connections, developing political connections. Cap and invest was a big one. And let's see. And another one was to stop sacrificing personal health for economic benefits. So I'll pass this over to Gina.
And on this side, we have understand what would help individuals in the poverty level to be warmer, more comfortable. Oh, efficiencies, like making more efficient housing. Alternative system building, community-based, cooperatively structured, alternative energy companies and products. A carbon tax, internalized carbon production, cultural change, and capitalism is the cause. There's four involved, it's a 4 in 1. Use personal stories to better communicate messages of the EJ Challenge, and support programs that ensure health care for our disadvantaged citizens. So thank you so much.
So we led the Toxics in Water breakout session, specifically about Flint, Michigan. And we realized that the problem is huge and systemic and requires an infrastructure overhaul. That might be a little bit past the breadth of this conference, but the point is that, here, put up your sign there.
Now?
Yeah.
Now?
So, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll take this mic for just a quick minute. Right now, we know that the big guy in the office wants to spend money on infrastructure, but it's not the infrastructure that's here to help and fix what happened in Flint and other communities that are exposed to lead from their drinking water, which is, again, not from the source, but it's from the service pipes that lead to their homes. And currently, our infrastructure is failing. So one of the solutions that we propose is that there is the People's Climate March happening in DC and all around this country on April 29th. So for Vermonters here, we, the Environmental Law Society is partnering with the Vermont chapter, with Sierra Club, to bring buses from Montpelier and South Royalton down to DC to march. So we thought, what a great idea to tell the big guy and all the other people in office who are managing the budget that we need to put our money into our water infrastructure in this country. So this, I asked, what would be a great sign that tells them exactly that? So this is what one of our attendees came up with. So if you're here, you could stand up because this is the solution you proposed. Thank you. So we'll post this somewhere, and we're all going to collaborate and make sure that in DC, in Montpelier, around the country, we're holding something that looks like this.
So part of that is at the local level. We talked with Shana Casper from Toxics Action Center, and so what we really want to stress is that these are not only national problems, but they're local problems. They start at the local level and they go all the way up. They umbrella out to the national problem. So when your neighbor says, "My water tastes funny," say, well, why don't you call Toxics Action Center? There are community organizations that can help. So get that word out. Listen to your community members. Ask them, are you okay? Is there something can we help you? What can we do to help? And that means there is infrastructure in place. You have to access it. And so knowing that it's there is part of the issue. And so make sure that you tell people, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. There are organizations that want to help. They're online, they're just a Google away. And they have the infrastructure and the political capital to be able to help. So one of them is Toxics Action Center in Vermont, and regionally as well. So those are our solutions. One is getting the word out, and two is making sure that you're at that climate change march. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Velasquez. Sam and I were the student leaders from NULSA who were part of the breakout session, Tribal Environmental Justice Issues, Sovereignty on the Front Lines. We talked about consultation, big topic, frustrating topic. We basically decided the solutions to that issue are going to have to be revamping the trust doctrine between the United States and tribes, or changing consultation to include tribal consent as a requirement, so that meaningful consultation cannot be interpreted to mean I called them on the phone, they didn't answer, and they didn't call me back, and I'm good. And there was also a few others that were included using international law, human rights declarations for the rights of indigenous peoples to help push local communities to make those changes rather than focusing on a top-down approach, focusing on a bottom-up approach.
Holding political officers accountable or asking them if they even have opinions on treaties and tribal rights. Often they're not even going to have an answer. But if people start asking, they're going to start forming opinions. So just a basic thing we can all do.
Thank you.
So Jay and I were the student leaders for the Title VI Environmental Justice and Affected Communities breakout session. And we had Professor Patrick Puerto and Professor Marian Lado from Yale School of Law.
So we basically had four solutions that we came up with in our breakout session. The first one is to learn the environmental laws that apply. Professor Puerto surprised me by saying you need to learn the Clean Air Act instead of Clean Water Act, more importantly. But learn the legal and technical language, but then also learn how to explain it in plain English. The second one was to apply environmental laws in the environmental justice context, to use them to your advantage, and then to understand civil rights law. That might be something that the EPA may not fully understand because they've never found any intentional discrimination or disparate impact. And then finally, be aware of your audience. To be a good advocate and to know how to be a good advocate, you have to know what arguments to use in front of a certain judge or a certain panel. And that's it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Doherty, and I helped run the session on addressing renewable energy, barriers to renewable energy. And basically, we talked about energy justice as a component of environmental justice, and that's sort of a two-pronged analysis. The first part of that is addressing what's known as fuel poverty, and that is an inability to pay for the energy sufficient to basically stay alive in the winter. There are people who all over this country die every winter because they cannot afford to heat their homes. So a way to address that, we talked about building more energy efficient homes and increasing insulation in homes so that they don't need as much energy. And then the second prong is as we move forward into the new energy era and away from fossil fuels, we need to make sure that we include low-income communities in that transition. And so a part of that, we talked mostly about state policies, including net metering and making sure that everyone has access to renewable energy and has the storage capacity to maintain their system. So we had speakers from Vermont, an organization responsible for building energy efficient, net zero energy modular homes. And we had a representative from the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. And together they have worked to replace many modular homes in Vermont with net zero homes, so these communities can stay powered throughout the year and reduce their electric bill. And that was mostly it.
Hello, my name is Renee Smith, and I was one of the co-hosts for the Food Desert and Sustainable Agriculture Workshop. So we had the pleasure of having Richard Moore as one of our speakers with Las Jardines Institute, as well as Julia Schuler from Salvation Farms here in Vermont. So to begin with, Richard Moore's organization, they have a 14-farm cooperative that was able to really cultivate farming as well as access to food in their community. Their community was also able to acquire 540 acres worth of land that they were able to keep away from entities coming in to cultivate, to use the land either as a facility or factory and to further pollute the community. But that space is now used as an outdoor classroom as well as for farming, and it's available to their community for the needs that they need specifically that they want and ask for. So that's an amazing effort on their end. One of the solutions that we presented to possibly using or cultivating their community more ways is to create partnerships with other entities such as through health providers and creating connections through farming and agriculture that can provide more healthier options for their community, especially through food, while using that healthcare infrastructure. One of the big issues that he spoke about was the use of food being sold in dollar stores in their community, and how that food, although it's available, it doesn't make it healthy because the food is usually either heavily used with pesticides and not the quality of food that you'd get at bigger box stores. So we spoke about some solutions and how to tackle that from a very legal perspective. Considering Salvation Farms, they are a gleaning organization that have provided a gleaning infrastructure in Vermont that's pretty amazing in a way that that food is not only able to be given to hungry people, but it's also used to provide food for nursing homes and especially the prison system as well. They've even created a workforce development program that employs formerly incarcerated individuals that get them that work experience and training that they can use. So one of the issues that they had was how do they get that food out of just this charitable model but into a more marketable market. So we talked about some solutions that as far as creating partnerships with local entities, state and government to use to subsidize that food as opposed to outside food such as through distribution companies, and really strengthening Vermont farmers and providing profits for Vermont farmers for their ugly foods. So really creating a market for gleaning foods was a clear solution to that issue. We really enjoyed our speakers. They had such amazing insight, and it was a wonderful room, and I'm happy that we were able to include food in the conversation that is commonly left out in environmental justice. So I appreciate that.
Sure, that would be great. So I was with the grassroots organizing breakout session, and we were lucky enough to have Brian Tokar with us from the University of Vermont and Alex Perlman, who had to leave, unfortunately. But we started it, Brian gave us an overview of environmental justice in Vermont, and noted that we have some particularly strong work in migrant justice, and talked a bit about the ongoing efforts that are happening in this state, and gave us a little history on the origins. Like really the first environmental justice that happened in Vermont was in Williamstown when some dry cleaners contaminated the water and the air around some schools, and they rallied together and got them out and sort of set the stage for future work in the climate arena in Vermont. And then we went, I'm gonna see if I can use that. We talked about the importance of base building for bringing people together, especially in the grassroots arena, and how globalization is a word that's thrown around a lot lately, but really shouldn't be corporate driven, that it's not necessarily bad in and of itself, but the way that it is now is not the best. That's a hyperbole. And the importance of indigenous and land-based movements. We talked about how another fundamental component of grassroots organizing is that it is a justice-centered outlook, so that it really incorporates the perspectives of the people that you're working with and comes from the ground up as opposed to the top down. And then we talked to Alex about his experience with a group. Fine. So we had Alex talking from Rising Tide about the campaign that he's been working on for the past 5 or so years in dealing with preventing fossil fuel infrastructure from being installed in Vermont and preventing the lockdown in a carbon economy, talking about the frack gas pipeline in particular that was slated to run under Lake Champlain, but thankfully that part isn't happening. As you can see, I should have been a map drawer, but I'm in law school. Here we are. And so then I stopped taking notes and went on a ramble about my own thoughts and feelings about organizing in the grassroots level, and how, as lawyers, we need to really do our best to rectify the disconnect between where decisions are made and who decisions affect, and how we tend to place blame on people for their situations that they're in, and then kind of project solutions upon them that they didn't ask for and that they had no part in creating, and how it sort of needs to be brought to the same level, so that the people that are being impacted by these problems that we really create in the courtroom and in the legislative halls have access to participate in those venues, and if not, then we need to change where the decisions that affect people are made. And so it's not about making decisions for people that are good or bad or blaming them for things that are outside their control, but like working together on the same level and sort of breaking down the barriers, like expertise barriers and academic barriers and the like stuffy language that keeps people out of having real control over their lives.
So thank you to all the students who took notes and kept track of that. So the first part of your homework is now due, which is what themes did we hear that cut across all 9 of those various breakout groups? What are some of the key thematics that we can draw as lessons from these conversations? What's the collective wisdom in here, which is profound, really? So let's just take a moment, and maybe folks can kind of shout out. Maybe you guys, do either of you have paper? There you go. Maggie's got paper. So capture some of these themes so we can report back. So what are some of the themes you heard? Yes?
I think essentially we're all stewards of this precious planet, and it's up to us to keep it going right.
Great. We're all stewards. We're all connected to this. It's a community effort. I have to say, one of the things I heard really loud and clear was community. You know, both the idea of starting local, working with local groups, listening, making sure that the communities have access to information and to each other and to organizations like Shayna's that exist all over the country to make sure that we can help support them. Yeah, in the back.
Alignment of groups with common interests to increase power, especially at this time.
Great. Yeah, and I think that fits in with the idea of community building. And that the community building is, you know, we think often about community meaning local community, but really, as Esther said, right, we're all humans, so we're all part of a broader community, and that community reaches nationally and internationally. So where are the alignments? Yes, Ruth. Yeah, and it's a really great point. It's something I heard from a lot of the groups. It was a sense of hope and optimism and the need to focus on that, of a future that we can all aspire to. I also heard something that it's related to this, which is the idea of thinking about prosperity, and not just about prosperity in the sense of money, but prosperity in the sense of our quality of life. I thought Representative Mitchell did such a terrific job of describing the many ways in which housing, economic development, and environment and public health came together in his community, and that's what kept people together, that the building of a sense of hope towards a better future. Other themes? Yes.
I would say education, educating people on the issues that are happening in communities around them and across the country, across the world, and educating them on what they can do about it.
Right, education, and related to the two kind of related themes that I heard in a lot of this was information, having access to data, transparency about information, making sure that people have access to good science, to good expertise, engineering, to an understanding of the law, and to be able to speak about the law in plain English so people can follow it. And another part of education is in some ways like Shana Casper and those who do grassroots advocacy and grassroots organizing over time, is thinking about how to communicate, how to use communication to educate not just the communities, but the public officials, the legislators, who may just simply not really understand the effects that are happening on their constituents. Other themes? Yes?
Well, I wish I was a lawyer. Like you just said.
There's a law school right here. We'll happily take you.
I wish I was a lot of things, but I'm not. I don't know, after this attending today, I want to go back to my two senators and House of Representatives and ask them, well, not just them, but any future candidate for local, state, or political office to develop as part of their platform when they're running, their agenda, to have as a high priority to introduce and support legislation if it passes that will require laws that would put the responsibility onto the state and federal government to be accountable for the construction, care, and maintenance of all types of water sources. All the water transmission lines, such as pipes or aqueducts or whatever. Anything involving state and local municipalities. I would want them to prioritize that kind of legislation. That's a solution. If we could get politicians to act, to do something concrete with law.
That was great, and that was absolutely a theme I heard in every single group, and maybe it's not surprising since this is a law school, and the reporters and a lot of the participants were lawyers, but I heard about the law as a theme, that hearkening back to we both need to enforce the law as it exists today and hold our public officials accountable for implementing it, but we also shouldn't be afraid of changing the law and asking and our legislators to change it. And frankly, as someone who has really started my career in 1985, which was it's right around that time environmental law stalled, at least at the federal level and in many states. We have been playing, those of us engaged in environmental policy and law, have for several decades now been playing defense. We are terrified of changing the law. That cannot be the state of affairs for the next 30 years. We have to find ways to change the body politic so that we can, in fact, move comprehensive, systematic change in the law. Other themes? Yes?
I think a lot of people kind of skirted around this by talking about humanizing whatever the solution that you're trying to find, or humanize whoever you're talking to. And I think no matter who you are at the table, whatever problem you're trying to solve, I think the one thing that wasn't said but is an underlying theme is empathy. I think if you act in empathy in whatever problem you're trying to solve, you can avoid a lot of those unintended consequences. And I think that an empathetic listener as well as an empathetic problem solver is going to get to the heart of the issue. And I just think that's a common theme that we were all not saying but feeling.
But feeling's implicit. Yeah, pass the microphone to Esther. I think Esther was gonna add to that.
I think with listening to all this and pointing the lawyers, especially environmental lawyers, in the right direction of feeling like I'm feeling, and not giving, you know, not giving a hill of beans about those big time landfill owners or these big time construction people that are coming into these communities. And by them coming out there, rolling their sleeves up and doing all they can for the community, especially listening. I mean, that's a healing part, but especially when I can't even put it no other way than Wade Ellis and every day we wake up with a burden. I mean, every day we can't go to sleep without thinking about what can we do the next day about this environmental problem. See, it's just, you don't understand it until you on hand is the best experience. When you see it out there and you can see it with your own eyes, that is the best experience, because it bothers me a lot because it's happening in mostly our community. And I can't explain it no better. I mean, you know, I can't say it no, we need help. I mean, we deserve everything else everybody else got. I mean, just because we poor, just because we all this, we still deserve clean air and clean water. And stop just saying it, just make it happen. Lawyers have a chance to do it. Do what you're supposed to do. Get out there and do what you're supposed to do. Like Martin Luther King, like all those people stood up there for our rights. Why ain't no sleeves up? I'm going out there to fight for those people.
All right. Thank you, Esther. All right, maybe one or two. Any others? Yes, Alice.
I heard more than once, I'm pretty sure, that we need to figure out ways to include low income and minorities in the transition to energy efficiency. And one of the most fascinating to me was to hear about the energy efficient housing programs that are going on here in Vermont. And I really wish we could do something like that in Alabama. I don't know, I keep thinking we would probably have pushback from our power company, but maybe not. Maybe we should try it and see.
Yeah, no, and I think that relates very much to the idea of community building and building bridges. In Vermont, one of the things that I did experience when I was in state government was how really easy it was, and it's because of the scale of this place, to get people from housing and energy and environment and public health in the room together, both advocates, public officials, and businesses and municipal leaders, and to solve problems. And I do think, while that is somewhat unique to Vermont, I would hope that that's a scalable model that we can apply across the whole country and even in very populated states. One last thought or theme? All right, well, I'll offer the last one that I had on my list that didn't come out, and it's also in some ways kind of somewhat implicit. But it was the idea of public health as a really organizing idea and theme. It's something that cuts across every community, and it's something that resonates with every person. And so thinking about these issues in ways that align us and pull us together in the same way that we may want to talk about prosperity more broadly, using health as an organizing tool to talk about environmental justice. It came up in some way or another in almost every conversation, whether it was toxics or drinking water or climate. Well, I'm going to say one brief thank you, and then I'm going to wrap up with a summation. And I think we can do this by 5 o'clock, and you can go out and then brave the elements. So I won't endeavor to thank all of the people that contributed to this event today, because it's not possible for me to do that, and I will inevitably leave somebody out, whether it's one of the many amazing speakers that we had today, or all the students that contributed, or the members of the community, or the members of the Vermont Law School faculty and staff. I won't try. But there are two people that I'd like to single out that put their heart and their souls into this conference, who had the idea and who took that idea and worked it with the other parts of the student community, and who didn't do it in a way that was competitive, but did it in a way that was collaborative, who pulled together faculty, who pulled together students, and through the force of their personalities and their will, managed to invite the most prestigious, nationally esteemed group of environmental justice experts and practitioners and leaders than I have ever had the honor to be in the room with. I just have to say, I am deeply honored to be on this podium with Sherri White and Maggie Galka. So a summation of some of the things that I heard today. I heard from the eminent Quentin Pear, environmental justice is a civil rights movement of the 21st century. I heard him say that environmental justice is about people. I heard many of our speakers say just the same thing, some version of we are all in this boat together. I heard Charles Lee say, and this is no small thing to hear from someone with his perspective and expertise and experience, environmental justice is here to stay. I also heard from Charles, we all have to take a stand. We all have a stake in making a difference. I heard this quote from Mr. Richard Moore, we would not even have a need for environmental justice if there was not environmental injustice. And I also heard from him that we are building an intergenerational movement. This is not just about us. This is not just about our parents. It's not just about our children. It's all of that, plus our grandchildren and subsequent generations. We heard from Randy Heyman, who works with corporations frequently, and I feel glad to know that there are people like Randy out there advising those corporations. He said, greed is not good. He said he advises his clients to do the right thing, and that he tells them that we live in a green world and they need to live in it. I heard from Esther, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a human, and we are all humans, and we're all entitled to the same rights. I heard from Al, make sure the community feels heard. It was a powerful idea, a powerful statement that I think echoed something I heard in many of the groups and conversations today. I heard from Representative Mitchell, meetings, meetings, meetings. But let's have some action. Let's take some action. He also said something that was really powerful and important for us to all remember, which is that the one thing that can derail a community or destroy a community or a movement is the failure to share, to develop, and communicate a common vision. And he also talked about the need to connect the dots, that when we fail to connect the dots, we allow injustice to persist. Shana Casper, who I regret I couldn't go to every single panel, but so I got to hear Shana, and Shana said, we need to show up for ourselves. We need to speak for ourselves and tell our own stories. That's how we build connection to other people and other human beings. And we need to recognize, said Shana, that we are part of a common group of people, and we need to recognize the power of those connections and of the organizations that we build together. And the last one I'll share was Martha Judy said something that doesn't sound particularly all that profound, but I have to reinforce as a law professor, which is if you're a lawyer and you're out representing people, you have to pay attention to the law. Professor Puerto might echo this. You have to know the law. You have to have the skills. You have to know what you're doing, or you're not helping anybody. So let me just share a few of my own thoughts and observations as we get ready to depart and head out for the weekend and enjoy the snow. One of the themes that I have experienced over my career in working and advocating on these sets of issues of environmental protection and public health and justice and race is that we have a choice. All of us have a choice. We live in a choice of whether we choose community or division. And that doesn't mean that we ignore differences. We should celebrate our differences, right? We should celebrate our different cultures, our different religions, our different backgrounds, our different ethnicities, our different beliefs, our different ideologies. That is what is so powerful and rich about being in America. We should and have to celebrate those things. But those differences between us can divide us. Now, and it's not that being divided is always bad. And I love competition. If you ask my kids growing up in Montpelier who they most hated and feared, it would be the kids from East Montpelier. If there's anybody in the whole universe that my kids have something in common with, it's the kids in East Montpelier. But that's the group they choose to most fear and hate. But it's around sports. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to hate the Patriots or love the Patriots. I think that's okay. I think I'm comfortable living in a society where we draw those kind of distinctions among ourselves. But when it comes to clean air, when it comes to clean water, when it comes to clean soil, when it comes to safe food, when it comes to a right to exist in the face of catastrophic, cataclysmic climate change, in these cases, there should not be any differences. There should not be ideological differences. We should not be operating on a different set of facts or a different set of science. This should not be a partisan issue. This should not be an ideological issue. Now, how we solve those issues and how we move forward, yes, of course, we're going to have different perspectives and approaches and disagreements. But that we should work on these things together, there should be no difference. We cannot allow our history to divide us. That does not mean that we need to ignore or should or can ignore the history of greed, the history of race hatred in this country. We have to confront that. If we are to transcend that history, we have to acknowledge it, we have to talk about it, but we cannot allow it to stop us from making progress. We must act. We must act as individuals. We must act as communities. We must act in our roles, in our institutional roles, in our professional roles. But if there's one thing that is absolutely clear about this conference, and I know I am preaching to the choir, because you're all here at 5 o'clock on a Friday, right before the weekend, it's that we need to act. And this brings me to our last homework assignment, which is go get them. Go do it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dean Mears, for that incredible wrap-up. We're going to be quick so that we can get to cupcake eating and mingling and those of us that need to get on the road. So I'm also not going to try to thank everyone that had anything to do with this conference because we would be here until 6 or later. But there are 6 people or groups of people that I would like to thank. The first is our student leaders for the breakout sessions. They were here last night until midnight getting things ready. They were in Montpelier last night at the reception. They've literally been talking to me about this since October, and they've been with us every step of the way. So I'd like to acknowledge them one more time with a round of applause. The next person that I would like to thank, and I don't know if she can hear me because she's in the live stream, but it's Emily Potts. And Emily is a new staff member here at Vermont Law School, and she has made the live streaming of today possible so that more people could join us from outside of South Royalton. So thank you to Emily. And then lastly, this really is a student-run event. However, Sherri and I and our student team had a lot of advising help. And there are 4 people in particular that have been on multiple phone calls with Sherri and I, multiple conference room meetings, multiple I'll see you in the hallway, I need XYZ thing taken care of. And those people are Dean David Mears, Professor Quentin Pear, Marian Engelman Lotto, and Professor Pat Puerto. We really would not be here without them. And now I'm turning it over to Sherri.
Thank you. Wow, that's all I can say. You all won't hear me say environmental justice again anytime soon because I've been saying it ever since I got here. But I think this is the evidence of why I kept saying environmental justice from the time I got here. I have had the opportunity to visit some of these communities across the country when I was with the Interagency Working Group on Environmental Justice, and had the opportunity to work with federal agencies to try to get them to understand the importance of doing this. So this is, for me, is the sort of last step to let you, as potential attorneys, understand that no matter where you are or what you're doing, you can have an impact on and in environmental justice communities. Thank you.
One last housekeeping thing. If you could return your name tags to the registration table on your way out, we will recycle them. And otherwise, drive safely. Thank you.